Hey guys, it's Sam here. This is our third ever webinar that we're presenting tonight, helping a child thrive, how to support child development. This is presented as a community service from Imagine Therapies. So I'm the head of clinical services at Imagine. I'm also so this is our third ever webinar. Keep that in mind. Just if we have any technical issues, please bear with us and we'll try and get through together. We haven't had any technical issues so far with these webinars. So if we do, just bear with us. Now, the only other thing I wanted to raise to you guys before we start is it would be wonderful to get a little bit of participation from you. So if you're tuning in through Google Plus, feel free to, I've activated the chat function, so you'll be able to enter into the chat on the right hand side there, where you're from, where you're tuning in from, how old your kids are, that kind of thing. If you're tuning in through YouTube, you won't be able to use that functionality through YouTube. However, if you are tuning in through YouTube, I'll invite you to head over to our Facebook page. So if you just go to Facebook and search Imagine Therapies, Allied Health for Children, you'll come across our Facebook page, and I've posted a link to the Google Plus event page on there. However, if you just want to comment on that post, feel free to put in any questions you have, or if you're where you're tuning in from, and things like that. It's great to know who I'm talking to, although I can't see you. So let's get straight into it, guys. I just wanted to start by sharing with you this quote. So this is by Dr. Stanley Greenspan, and for those of you who are familiar with Dr. Greenstan's work, he was one of the pioneers of relationship-based early intervention programs for children with autism. And he said, all children have within them the potential to be great kids. It's our job to create a great world where this potential can flourish. I really love this quote. This is actually one I think that will get blown up and put on the wall in our clinic, in one of our clinics. Now, for those of you who tuned into one of the other webinars that we've had, it's becoming a bit of a ritual for me to try and sneak in a photo of my own daughters. So these two here, like Olive and Hazel, they are my daughters. Olive is the one in the blue dress. She actually just started school today. So we're a private allied health service. So we offer occupational therapy, speech therapy, and psychology services for children and their families. We also have case coordinators. We've got one clinic up on the Sunshine Coast. That's our head office. That's in Brightwater. We also have a clinic space in Strathpine. So if those of you who are tuning in from North Brisbane, if you're familiar with the Strathpine GP Super Clinic, we have a clinic space with them. And in March, we're opening our third space, which is in Highgate Hill, which is in partnership with the Possums Clinic and Dr. Pamela Douglas, who you guys may know. So this is just a link to our website, www.imaginetherapies.com.au. You can actually watch these webinars from our website, and this one you'll actually be able to watch the recorded version on YouTube or on the website, or from those links. So what do? We do quite a range of things at Imagine. So we have those three disciplines. We have OT, speech therapy, and psychology. We exclusively work with children and families. So although, yes, we do work a lot with children, we're also actually working with parents, siblings of children with special needs. And the things that we do with children vary in a number of different ways. So things like screening, and developmental assessment across those all three disciplines. We do direct therapy for a range of different diagnosis, children with different diagnoses. So, for example, early intervention services for children with autism. We provide consultation services to schools and early learning centres. And then we also do educational presentations like this. So this is one of the things that I love to do, webinars like this, but we also do face-to-face training and educational programs for teachers and early learning centre staff, and then also for parents. Our school and early learning centre based therapy is one of our largest therapy streams. So we have a number of partner schools around Queensland, specifically southeast Queensland. And what we do with those schools is we do everything from screening to assessment, and then ongoing therapy if it's required at school during school time. And the benefit of school-based therapy is that there's collaboration with the teacher by having a session at school. There's also the added convenience of not having to bring a child to a clinic. Because you're at school, it's very easy for you to have your child participate in an assessment or therapy. And those great benefits are one of the reasons why we've put a big effort into making sure that we have partner schools who we can provide that service to. If you have a chat with your school, we do have some flexibility right now. If your school would like to reach out to us and contact us, we can certainly chat with them about becoming a partner school. And just one of the last little bits of promotional material in the webinar. So those of you who tuned in last week, same time last week, we did a webinar on the Imagine Therapies Early Intervention Program. So this is something that's really exciting that we're rolling out this year. It's a new and innovative approach to supporting early intervention for children with autism. We've got another webinar for this program happening on the 3rd of Feb, which is next Thursday. So if you just, you have to register for that one though. So if you send an email to this address down here on the right, iteip@imaginetherapies.com.au, you'll be able to, if you can just send us through your name, your phone number, and your geographical region and your address, if you can, then we'll send you through the links to the webinar. And if you're interested in subscribing to the program, well, that's something that certainly we can help you with down the track. So the benefit of that program is the focus on parent involvement in the therapy process, and it's really fantastic. It uses a combination of web-based learning and group therapy opportunities for children who are local to one of our clinics. But even for children in rural and remote areas, it's really important for those families as well. And of course, it's accessible because they can tune in online, just like this webinar you're viewing tonight. All right, so in this webinar, what we're going to cover is development in general. But then we're going to talk about physical skills, cognitive development, sensory development, speech and language development, and social emotional development too. And I've got a clip that I want to show you at the end. Now I'm going to have to go over each one of these fairly quickly. But yeah, feel free to post any questions that you've got, and if we have time at the end of the webinar, I'll check out the Facebook page and I'll try and answer any questions if they're posted there. Okay, so this is kind of the equation for supporting child development. So child development involves two different things happening in combination. So there's a child who's reaching new stages, and there's also changing situations. I'm going to go into this a little bit further. So for a child, if you place them on the floor as an infant, then eventually they'll start pushing, lifting their head off the ground, and then they'll go on to pushing up with their arms. Eventually they will figure out that if they drop one of their shoulders when they're lifting, pushing themselves up with their arms, and they'll actually roll. And so they go through this this sequence of reaching new stages. So it's something that's active for a child. When they go from one stage to the next, that's them reaching a new stage, achieving a new skill. So a child going from laying on their tummy to rolling, that's a new stage. Or if you put a child on the floor and they're crawling, and they crawl up on the couch and they go, and they scuffle along, the couch on their feet, well, that's a new stage. And so new stages are something that's, children have to reach new stages for development to occur. What is also necessary, though, is that there's got to be a changing situation. So it's all well and good for children to be actively seeking for new stages. That's something that's active for the child. However, something that is passive for the child is changing situations. So, for example, using the same example of a child going from crawling to furniture walking, if that child's situation was never changed and they were left in a cot or in a bassinet or in a pram, and they were never placed on the ground, well, they'd never have the opportunity to reach new stages. So the changing situation is something that's passive for the child and is really active for the parent. So if you think about child development, it's not all dependent on the child, but it's also not all dependent on anyone else. So it's got to be a combination of the active seeking for new stages for a child, and then the parent actively changing the situation so that child has the opportunity to reach new stages. And that's how child development occurs. That's how it happens. It's new stages and changing situations. And I'll refer to that a little bit more as we go on. Often, if we have children who are coming into the clinic who are having trouble with some areas of development, so for example, children that have ASD, they may, the components of their, their unique developmental needs may be that they're finding it difficult to reach new stages, with the way that they process the world and the different challenges that they have. They have difficulty reaching new stages. On the other hand, if you come into our clinic, who have, just simple motor delays, sometimes it's because they haven't been exposed to the situations where they develop the skills that they need, and so that's where development can get hung up too. So I guess there's two sides of the coin that we have to remember. Now, before we go any further, what I want you guys to do is follow one of these links, whichever one relates to your child. So whichever child, if you've got more than one, the eldest, or whichever one you've got in mind as you're viewing this webinar. So these links here are Queensland Health Developmental Milestones. They were published in 2003, so quite a while ago now. However, they're still very applicable. Not much has changed in terms of milestones. And the good thing about these that I really like is that they're very simple to understand. So if you can get a copy of these up in your browser in a separate window, then that will really help you for this next little bit. You'll see with the Milestones Checklist, hopefully you guys have got it up by now, there's two different columns. So on the left here, it says an average child can, and this relates to what the milestones actually are. So if you think of milestones in terms of the new stages, these are the new stages that a child is reaching around the, for example here, 4 years. So an average 4-year-old child can do these things that are listed here on the left side here. On the right side, signs of possible problems include, these are what we call red flags. So these are things which are an indication that there may be something that requires further investigation. The only issue I do have with these forms is that using the term average, no child is actually average. So although it's here, an average child can do this. An average 4-year-old, considering no children are average, can walk alone up and down stairs 1 foot per step. Well, that's all well and good. Some 4-year-olds may not be able to do that. It doesn't mean that they have a developmental problem per se. However, it is probably something that we'd want to start investigating around 4 years if that child is not reaching that milestone. Okay, so supporting children's development is creating an environment where your child is challenged. So this is the changing situation part. Now, what I'm hoping is that as we go through this webinar, you guys will start thinking independently on how you can change what you're doing, change the ways that you're supporting your child with their play, the toys that you buy for, birthdays and things, to help their development along. You're wanting to give them changing situations so that they can grow and reach new stages and hit their next milestone. I guess the fact that you guys are tuning into this webinar means you're very conscious of this. And as a result, your kids are probably right on track with their milestones. However, that form will really help you to get a handle on where your child what they should be doing. And you can actually tick these off, as you kind of check them out at home. So we're really creating an environment where our children are challenged. Okay, so areas that we tend to focus on for physical development in early childhood are, we consider their fine and gross motor skills. So fine motor skills are actions that occur at the small joints. So for example, movements that happen at the wrist, in the hands or the fingers. Gross motor skills are actions that occur at a large joint. So that's, things like walking, running, kicking, throwing, catching a large or medium-sized ball. We often also talk about coordination, which is the ability to use motor skills smoothly and efficiently, including being able to use both sides of the body together. And then often we talk about strength and endurance. So, they're fairly simple to understand, being able to exert the force necessary for any given task and for the required amount of time. So each of these 4, and these are just 4 of the many areas that I could talk about for physical development, but as we see kids coming through our clinic in early childhood, we're often checking their motor milestones, which tend to fall within these categories. Now, what can you do? So this is where you guys need to think about, how do I change the situation? So looking at your child's milestone form, have a look at the motor component and try and think, how can you turn that into an activity, or how could you turn it into a game or into a fun task? And it will be different for each of you, because each of your kids are probably different ages. So it's something that you can really get creative with. But I guess the most simple things that you can do is things like choosing toys and games that encourage either gross or fine motor skills. So a lot of you will remember the game Operation. So that was the board game where it had it had a little man, and he was laid out on an operating table, and you had tweezers, and you had to try and reach into the little holes in his legs and arms to pick out the pieces. If you think about fine motor skills and the small actions happening at the small joints of the hands and fingers, well, that was actually a really fantastic fine motor game. Another one of my favorites is Jenga, which is the block stacking game. You take a block out at a time until the tower falls. But there's also things like threading, and then for gross motor skills, bikes and skateboards and balls and things, they're all really fantastic for changing the situation. One of the best things I think parents can do is really getting kids to do activities that get them using both hands at the same time. So one thing that's so cheap and really easy, and kids seem to really, really love it, is making pasta necklaces. So, just getting some string and some pasta. You get it for like 99 cents from Woolworths. Um, threading the pasta on the necklaces. That's actually a really fantastic task that supports what we call bilateral coordination, or using both hands together. And of course, the child's using one hand to hold the string, the other hand to hold the pasta. So things like painting, drawing, and colouring and printable pages. Using themes of your child's favorite TV show or movie. That's a really fantastic way to get kids into using pencils and paints and things. Very often with boys that come through our clinic, I hear parents say things like, "Oh, my child never wanted to draw, or never was interested in drawing," and that's all well and good. But being able to use a pencil, being able to eventually write, but that's actually a developmental milestone, being able to use and control a pencil. So we do want to challenge them by doing activities with them, even if they don't want to do them, doing activities where they're using pencils and paints and textures and things like that. And one really simple way is to just get them colouring something that they're interested in. So if they love octonauts, you can go online or check out Pinterest, or even just Google octonauts colouring pages, and you'll find that there's loads of stuff on the internet that's free that you can download. As well, there's things like dot to dots and maze activities. You and I probably did a lot of that when we were young. However, kids aren't doing it as much anymore. That kind of thing. Dot to dots and maze activities. They tend to. You need a certain level of accuracy for those activities to work. And that's an opportunity for a child to really practice being steady with the pencil, drawing straight lines. If they're doing a maze activity, not touching the walls of the maze and things like that. One of the best ways to support, motor development these days is really to avoid screen time. So screen time is kind of it's a real barrier for children these days. It's something that's really holding them back from developing. What we've started to notice is that, 10 years ago, kids heading into prep, they were able to do certain things. What we're noticing now, with the rise of iPads and smartphones and lots of screen opportunity, is that kids are actually coming into prep these days with poorer motor development, and we assume that it's because of screen time. Kids are spending much more time in front of the TV. We've got these 24-hour kids channels now, and Netflix and all sorts of things where kids can just zone out all day. The problem is, when they're on a screen, they're not outside running, they're not climbing trees, they're not kicking balls, they're not riding bikes or riding skates, and all of those things. It's like we're not changing their situation anymore because the TV is doing it for us. So that's something to be very conscious of. One thing that you can, one really simple thing you can do is stop doing everything for them. So, for example, my daughter, she's just started prep today, and we've been working. She can dress herself, completely woe to go now. She's been practicing doing her shoes and everything. However, she still struggles a little bit with buttons. So, although it would have been easy to just do the buttons for her, my wife and I, we let her struggle with it for a little while, and then we coached her through it. So instead of doing her buttons for her, we got her to do it. We practiced again with her, pinching the button, then opening the hole with your other hand, and then putting the button through the hole, grabbing it with the other fingers, and then pulling it through. And then she was able to do that. So those day-to-day opportunities, if you take advantage of them, then your child will really come in leaps and bounds. So yeah, only help them if they really need it, and when they do something really fantastic, go mental about it in a good way. So really celebrate what they did. Give them lots of praise and lots of encouragement, and get them ice cream or give them lollies, or do whatever you have to do to make sure that they really feel recognized because they did do something really well. Okay, cognitive development. So what I've got here is the definition of cognition, which is the mental action of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. So this graphic I've got here, it has the 4 stages, Piaget stages of cognitive development. I'm not going to go too far into these because this is a whole webinar of its own on cognition in children. So just really quickly, the sensory motor cognitive stage from 0 to 2 years, the infant is exploring the world through sensory and motor contact. So this is children, you see that a lot of putting things in their mouth as a way of exploring their world on a sensory level. So lots of chewing things, sucking with things, fiddling with things. Children are often they're still learning things like object permanence, which is understanding that although something is obscured by sight or covered, that it still actually exists and still is actually there. So that's why kids find peekaboo is such a fun game, because you're messing with the object permanence. If you cover your face, for a 0 to 2 year old who's in the sensory motor stage, they're still developing this object permanence. So when you cover your face, you've actually disappeared, and then you take your hands away. Oh, you're back again. That's why they find it so amusing. The pre-operational stage from 2 to 6 years. So the child uses symbols such as words and images to represent objects, but does not reason logically. The child also has the ability to pretend. So what we're really looking for during this stage is lots of pretend play. We really, really love to see kids doing things like playing with toys and playing with dolls and pretending to be mums and dads, and pretending to be doctors and firefighters and astronauts or whatever. We really like to see that, especially during that period. But of course, kids still don't tend to reason logically, and they're often very self-orientated. So those of you who have 2 to 6 year olds who had some tantrums this week, because they were starting school, and you thought, gee, that wasn't very logical. Well, yeah, that's what's going on. And they do tend to be egocentric, so very self-focused. From 7 to 12 years, kids tend to enter the concrete operational stage, so they start to think logically about concrete things, and this is where they really thrive with things like math, and yeah, interesting stage. And then formal operational is 12 years old and up, and this is where this is kind of the adolescent. Reasoning abstractly and thinking in hypotheticals. A lot of people I've spoken to who have teens would probably say that, 12 years an adult, that maybe still pre-operational, lots of egocentric behaviors, not rational. I don't know, there might be merit to that. We'll see. Might be an area for future research, but anyway. So there's actually a link if you want to look into Piaget stages of cognitive development. There's a link at the end of the slides. You can check it out or Google it. It's really fascinating stuff. So things that you can do to support cognitive development. So playing memory games, pairing and matching games are all really fantastic. Hide and seek, and like I mentioned with the development of object permanence, that's something that really helps that along for children. Playing with puppets, dolls, and everyday items, like I mentioned, imaginative play. If you have a chance, if you want to look into imaginative play, there's a really fantastic researcher. Her name is Karen Stagnetti. She's a real dynamo when it comes to imaginative play, and the research has linked a lot of different developmental areas to imaginative play, including things like social skills and language development and things. So I guess number one advice I could give you for supporting development would be, really support your child to do lots of imagining. There's also things like making up stories at bedtime. So me and my daughters, we used to do this a lot more than we do now, but what we used to do is instead of reading a book at night, we would make up a story and we would do it together. So what we would do is I would start the story, and it would usually go, once upon a time there was a princess named Olive, and she was, and then I leave it open for Olive, and she would make the next part, and she was a fairy princess. And so doing it together, it's just a way that you can get kids thinking, get them imagining, and reasoning, and get their brains working. However, reading is also very good. So, reading books to children is fantastic. And then certainly as they approach school in the kinder years, great time to start practicing identifying letters and numbers. And one of the best things that you can do, and this will come up again later in the webinar, is just asking loads of questions. When you're driving down the road or from day to day, just ask your kid lots of questions. They're asking you lots of questions. And you can ask them lots of questions. And if you're asking lots of questions, then they're going to be thinking about their responses. They're going to be thinking and reasoning through that as well. Sensory development. So the sensory system, often we talk about the 5 famous senses, which is taste, smell, touch, sight, and hearing. We often talk about those 5. There's actually 2 more that we don't refer to quite as often. So there's body awareness, which is sometimes we call it proprioception, and that's the way that we get that sense. So taste comes through our mouth and our tongue, smell comes through our nose, touch through our touch receptors in our skin. Body awareness comes through resistance to muscles and pressure on receptors in joints. So it's the understanding of where a child's or where a person's body is in space when you take away vision. Body awareness obviously is very important for lots of different areas, including coordination and things like that. There's also the sense of balance. So being able to orientate yourself in relation to gravity. That's what the vestibular sense includes. So there's 7 senses there. So when people talk to you about the 5 senses, tell them that there's 7. So supporting sensory development, this is really quite easy to do, but it's just exposing them to lots of different sensory environments. So lots of different changing situations. So number 1, the easiest thing you can do is letting your child play outside at home with no shoes on. So provided that your home environment is safe, please make sure there's no broken glass or anything around. But when they're on the grass or in the dirt or in the sand or in the mud, let them go outside with their shoes on. There's nothing that will happen to them if you make sure it's safe beforehand. Things like purchasing clothes, bed sheets, towels of different fabrics and textures are really good as well. So don't just buy cotton sheets, or don't just buy one type of or one fabric of clothing or things like that. Buy them lots of different fabrics of clothing and different things so that they can get used to different things on their skin. When they go out to the park, encourage them to go on the swings, on the slides, dancing with them. That's one really easy thing that you can do to support, vestibular development. You dance around the place and they'll love it. Taking them to the beach or the sand pit. I've got a story related to this one. So my youngest daughter, Hazel, she never used to like the beach. She used to hate the sand. And, we live on the Sunshine Coast. There's beaches 15 minutes away from us. My wife and I, we basically grew up on the beach, but as Hazel was born, we didn't we didn't take her to the beach all that much. So probably for the first couple of years of her life, she did not like sand. She had a real problem with sand. And so we realized that we needed to take her to the beach more. So over time, we exposed her more and more to sand, and now she's gotten to the point where she's happy for us to, bury her up to her shoulders when we do go to the beach. So, when you identify that your child does have a problem with, things like certain textures on their hands, what you really want to do is expose them to those textures. Try and get them to desensitize to, to whatever it is that they're finding that's a bit noxious. So if it's slimy things that they're scared of, get them, even if it's just a little bit at a time, putting their hands in slime or cream or something like that. One simple game that you can play to get kids, doing different sensory activities. So things like hiding toys in, a large bowl of rice or pasta or slime or shaving cream, and encouraging them to find those things and maybe even blindfolding them. That's a really simple way that you can, expose them to different textures, and it's something that will be fun and engaging for them. I just want to use this example to highlight how important sensory stimulation is. So this is a CAT scan of a typically developing 3-year-old brain. So you can see there, this is what we would consider to be normal. And now this is a comparison example of the same brain, the typically developing 3-year-old, compared to another 3-year-old who was in fact deprived of sensory experiences. So this was this image belongs to Dr. Bruce Perry, and he conducted a study where he examined the brain of a child who'd been exposed to global sensory neglect. So it's quite an extreme case, but you can see here that these children are both 3 years old, but because of the lack of sensory experience that this child on the right has had, their brain is actually smaller. It actually has less mass than the other child. So, and you can see here, even just the different areas of the brain which are more hollow than others. It's pretty incredible that just exposure to sensory stimulation, it helps neurodevelopment to the point it actually relates to actual brain mass, which is really interesting. So if you want to check out this study, again, the link is at the end of the slide, so you can have a look at it. Speech and language development. So like I mentioned, I'm an occupational therapist. I'm not a speech therapist. However, we do employ speech pathologists, and this is approved by them. So I won't go into it too much, but quite often people don't realize that speech and language are two separate things. So speech relates to saying the words, where language is knowing the words to say and then being able to place meaning to those words. So if you think about, sometimes children will come into our clinic, they'll say, parents will say, my GP thought there might be a language problem, but my child doesn't have a lisp, he doesn't say any words strangely. Well, that's because language is a different thing to speech. It's a whole different area. And so there can be children that have, speech delays, but their language is fine. And there can be kids that have language delays, but their speech sounds fine. There's this study here. This graph on the right relates to a study that was done by Hart and Risley in 1995. The reference is at the end of the slide. But it really highlights some interesting things. So, I'll go back to the slide here. So you can see here this study that they did. It measured vocabulary in children of according to their different demographics. So they had 3 groups. So that they were surveying children from professional families, so families that had parents who were working professionals. They had a group that was children who were from working class families, and then children who were from welfare dependent families. Now, this study, it measured the number of words that were spoken to these children within an hour. So the average number of words spoken to the child in an hour, and then compared it to their vocabulary. So what they found is that children in professional families heard on average 2,153 words per hour. And then obviously in the other groups here, you can see that those kids heard less. So what they found is that kids who were from professional families who had lots of words spoken to them from day to day, they had a larger cumulative vocabulary at the end. So what we can determine from this is that the more we speak to children, the better their vocabulary will be. So the more we speak to them, the better language skills that they'll have. Big surprise, right? Now, if you think about this, the difference between the demographics is not really the issue. It's think about the opportunities where you have to speak to your child. So, for example, you're driving down the road and your child says, "Look, Mum, there's a dog." And you look out the window and there's a few different things you can do. Oh, yes, that's a dog. That's great. That would be number one. Number two, you could say, "Oh, what color is the dog?" And your child would go, "Black." Oh, okay. Or you can take it a step further. "Oh, do you think the dog was happy or was it sad? Was it someone walking in? Was it a man or was it a woman?" And this comes down again to asking your child lots of questions. So the difference was probably not that children in professional families, they probably weren't sat down and had a big large conversation. It was probably the little opportunities for communication where they just happened to speak more to their child, from time to time during the day. So the things that you can do are things like reading to your child every day. So, a book a day, if you can do at least one book a day, that is going to be amazing for supporting their language development. Again, asking lots and lots of questions, even if they're crazy, even if you feel silly asking them, just ask them lots of questions and get them talking. Really try to avoid at all costs baby speak. So I don't know what it is about adults. Sometimes we like to baby speak our kids. We like to speak in funny little voices, and voices are okay, but when you start shortening words and calling things bickies and things like that, kids tend to learn, the language that they're spoken. So if we're talking to them in language speak, well, they're not learning adult speak; they're learning baby speak. So we really want to avoid baby speak at all costs. It is okay to change the tone of your voice, and we do that every day when we've got kids in the clinic. We speak with really exciting voices, and we make funny sounds, but we don't abbreviate words, and we don't speak like babies to them. When we make pronunciation errors, practice the word. So if they say, "Oh, I didn't do anything today," get them to break that down. Anything. Get them to stick their tongue out and practice making all the different sounds of the word so that they can pronounce it properly. There's also things like tongue twisters, singing songs in the car, and then things like blowing up balloons and blowing ink with straws, and other what we call oral motor games. So getting their lips and their tongues moving and working, preparation for speaking and things like that. So very simple things that you can do. Social emotional development. And no, that is not a picture of me. After the last one, someone did ask me, they said, "Oh, is that a picture of you with the little girl on your back?" No, that's not one I snuck in. So social emotional development includes attachment to parents, confidence, self-esteem, emotional regulation, and understanding the perspectives of others, and even more than that. So it really covers a whole bunch of different emotional areas. Childhood is an emotional time, and children learn to regulate emotions over time. Many of you tuning in, if your child is, the early years, they're probably still, having tantrums every now and again. That is age appropriate for a time, so don't panic too much about that. And it does improve over time. We know that emotional regulation is linked to confidence. So often the children who are less confident tend to have more emotional regulation issues. And the other thing that the research suggests is that emotional regulation in children often mirrors the emotional regulation of their parents. So if you're finding your child does have issues, managing their emotion, it might be an opportunity for you to do a little bit of self-reflection and think about whether, your emotional regulation is perhaps as it should be, and what you could do to be a bit more regulated. Whether it's having a no yelling policy at home or something like that. Sometimes those things can be very helpful in that kind of circumstance. I'm going to show you a video. Now this is one that I really like. If I can find it here, just bear with me for one moment. Okie dokie. So there's a really fantastic program called the Circle of Security, and some of you may have heard of this before, especially if you work in early learning or if you work in a school or in a community organization. If you ever get a chance to do Circle of Security training, it's a really fantastic course. I really encourage you to do it. I'm going to play you this short clip. It goes for about 4 minutes, and it just talks a little bit about this. So you can also look this clip up on YouTube or Vimeo, which is what I'm playing it off here. So I'll start that now.
Parents, we all wonder if we're getting it right. We want to know we're meeting our children's needs, helping them grow, and giving them all that we can. We try to combine our own experience of being parented with the advice of others and our own instincts and beliefs about what is best. And still, we so often worry that we're not succeeding. In a world that is always offering the next best parenting solution, the Circle of Security is based on decades of attachment research. Unlike many behavioral perspectives, it offers relationship tools to provide a new way of understanding your children's needs, creating lasting security for them and more satisfaction for you. The Circle graphic has been created to help you know what to look for, so you can read your children's behavior to guide you in meeting their needs. It's really not complicated. People of all ages have attachment needs. These needs can be divided in 3 ways. Let's look at this child. First, he needs to know the freedom and confidence to go out and explore his world. Second, he needs to feel assured that whenever he's ready, he can come back for comfort and protection. Third, he needs his caregiver to be in charge in a kind way. 3 basic needs that can be thought of as going out on the circle, coming in on the circle, and hands on the circle. Let's have a look in more detail. Feeling safe and supported, our children want to discover their world. When going out, they need to know that their exploration is encouraged, that we're right there watching over them, delighting in them, offering help when needed, and ready to enjoy their new adventures with them. And when they're coming in, they need us to refill their emotional cup. This means organizing their emotions and letting them know we are delighted to welcome them back, protect, comfort, and understand them. The key for us as parents is to remain strong and kind while knowing when to encourage their going out into the world and how to be available to welcome them back to us. It's crucial that we learn to identify our children's needs like this, because misreading them, or worse, missing them altogether, can cause pain and frustration. We all know how uncomfortable it can be to be held too close when we want to be out exploring, or kept at a distance when we need emotional support, or simply to be without someone who is bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, who we can trust to understand what we need when we're feeling lost, confused, or out of control. When a child misbehaves, the cause is often rooted in how safe and secure they're feeling. So it's not surprising that they behave well when a parent learns to tune into their child's needs on the circle in this way. And because our needs on the circle never disappear, learning to read cues can help you better understand and meet the needs of people of all ages, including your own. So that's all there is to it. Just know that at any given moment, your child is somewhere on the circle asking you to meet a need. Support my going out. Welcome my coming in. Be the hands that keep me safe by staying in charge and committed to helping me feel connected. And please remember this, there's no such thing as perfect parenting. At Circle of Security, we've come to realize that good enough is, well, good enough. All of us are going to miss needs on the circle time and again. Welcome to the club. But if we meet our children's needs enough of the time, the results will be happier, healthier, more secure children, and parents too.
Alrighty, hope you guys enjoyed that. So that's the Circle of Security. So I really encourage you to Google that and check it out. There's the link here. You can get it straight off the Circle of Security website. But it's a really fantastic program. One of the things that I really love about the Circle of Security is, the point that she mentioned there in the presentation, where parents need to be bigger, smarter, wiser, kinder, and we have to make sure when we're reviewing how we're parenting that we are being bigger, smarter, wiser, kinder, that we're being examples of what we hope for our children to become. And the two things that it mentions there, the going out in the circle, so supporting your children with their exploration, and then welcoming back on the bottom of the circle where we make it clear that we're there for them when they do come back, when they need us to organize their feelings or help them to be centered again, and then then they have a secure base, a secure attachment where they can then launch off and do more exploration. So that's a really fantastic area. So how to support emotional development in your children. So spending one-on-one time with each child is really important. And I have to say, as a father as well, this is really important for dads to remember. One-on-one time with each child, especially between boys and their dad or girls and their dad, and then just as equally as important with mum. It's really important that they spend one-on-one time with each parent, and that for that period of time, that they are the only thing that you're thinking about. So something else that's really important is expressing love following discipline or correction. So for those of you who are out there viewing, there's lots of different models of discipline that you use, and whichever you feel fits best with your morals or your values. I guess the most important thing that you can do following correction, so following discipline, is expressing love, helping that child to know that you do love them, that you are on their team, and that you're there for them, despite them making a bad choice and needing to be disciplined. Often the best way to support the behaviors you want to encourage is by giving them loads of attention when they're doing things that you want them to do. So lots of praise for positive behaviors more than punishing negative behaviors. And research suggests that giving praise or giving really strong reinforcement to the behaviours that you want to encourage, it works better to support positive behaviour than punishment for the behaviours that you don't want to happen. So that's something that to really keep in mind. Often, the attention that you give a child is like, well, in the clinic, I explain it to parents like lollies. If you give child attention when they're doing the wrong thing, well, then what you're actually doing is rewarding them for doing the wrong thing. If you do give them lots of attention when they're doing the right thing, then you're actually rewarding the good behaviours that you want to encourage. It's really important for parents, if you have emotional challenges that you're living with, things that you're working through, it's really important that you seek support for those. So particularly through a psychologist or a counsellor. We're really excited as we launch our psychology stream that parents will actually be able to go to their GP and get their mental health care plan and seek support through our clinical psychologists. So that's something that's available to you. Also, there's also many other fantastic services out there. So we also really want to make sure that we're displaying the behaviours that we want to encourage. So we are modelling for our children, staying calm and, acting appropriately towards others and not yelling and things like that. Things that we want to encourage. That's what we want to, we want to show that, using good manners, things like that. And then also at all levels of their development, inviting friends over to play. So having friends over, playing with them, meeting new people, having new social experiences, all of those things are really fantastic to help their development in this area. So these are some of the biggest barriers, I would say, that we often see in kids who are getting ready for school. So some of you tuning in, you'll have kids who have just started school. Some of you will have kids who are heading into the kinder years, or maybe who are already at school and been there for a while. Basically, these are barriers to school readiness that we often see. So persistent dependency on parents for self-care, really basic. Kids who can't toilet themselves or dress themselves. That's often a barrier to school readiness. There's unattained milestones. So for example, if you look again at your milestones form, kids start prep around the age of 5, some just before, some after. However, the curriculum is based on 5-year-old milestones. So we want to make sure that as children are heading into prep, that they've got, their 5-year-old motor milestones, well, milestones in every area. We want to make sure that they've got them down. The lack of, if they don't have those milestones down, well, it's usually the lack of foundation skills. So things like a lack of pre-writing skills is often a barrier for kids learning to write, things like that. Poor speech and language development. So, and I don't think I used these terms before, but receptive language is language coming in, and expressive language is language going out. So often if there's poor speech or receptive or expressive language, that can be a barrier to, well, we know oral language is a foundation skill for literacy, but also for communication and all those other areas. Also, there's things like sensory sensitivities and other, sensory preferences which are unmet, and then behaviour difficulties too. So children not being able to regulate their behaviour, it can often be a barrier to school readiness. So when to seek help, and I would say that this is one thing I really want to get across tonight. Often we hold our children back and we say, oh, let's see what happens when they get to school, or oh, let's just leave it for a bit longer. It's best if there are milestones that have not been attained, or if you notice red flags according to that checklist that you have, the Queensland Health Checklist, just get it checked. It's head down to your GP, ask their opinion, and then the best thing to do is to ask for a referral to an occupational therapist or speech therapist or psychologist, whichever is most relevant to the concern that you have. So if you do notice that, you're always best to at least get an assessment done, and then you can rule it out if it is. If it's not a problem, we'll let you know. If it is a problem, we can jump on it early, and it means that hopefully we can resolve it before it becomes a functional barrier, which is too significant. So yeah, if you notice that milestones aren't attained on time, or if there are red flags, or if you notice a regression in their skills, so a significant regression. So for example, kids will take a few steps backwards here and there. So for example, you might toilet train a child, and then in a few months you notice a bit of regression. They start wetting their pants again. That's probably normal. What I'm talking about is regression in terms of a child was walking, but now they can't walk anymore. That's the kind of thing that you want to get a referral for straight away, so that we can examine that. And like I mentioned, if you're concerned about it, it's worth getting it checked out. So if it's something that's putting stress on you, well, just get an assessment done, and then you can rule it out, and then it doesn't have to stress you out anymore. We can let you know if it is a problem or if it's not. And then, yeah, if it is, it's certainly something that we can provide support for. How can you access support? So first step would be to talk to your GP or child health nurse. You can speak to them about funding options too if you need to access allied health support. So you can do that via, if you're in Australia, the Enhanced Primary Care Plan referral, or some doctors like to call it the Chronic Disease Management Plan. You can ask your GP for one of those, and ask for a referral to whatever discipline relates to the milestone that you're concerned about. Now, you don't need one of those to visit with us. It does give you roughly a $50 rebate per session. However, you don't need a referral to come and see us. So if you give us a call, 54936807, or check out our check out our website. There's actually a survey you can do on there about if your child needs to see an OT or a speechy or a psychologist. And if you would like, we can schedule in short 10-minute drop-in sessions. So if you're not sure if it's something that you need, if you really just need a bit of advice, give us a call. We don't charge for them. That's something that we do as a community service. And you can pop in and you can chat to whoever of whatever discipline you need, and they'll be able to just give you some tips or some advice, or help you to understand what your options are if your child does need an assessment. So you can book an assessment with us in any of our 3 clinics. So there's our head office up in Brightwater on the Sunshine Coast. Again, there's the Strathpine GP Super Clinic in North Brisbane, if you're based around there. And then from March, you'll also be able to book in at Highgate Hill in Brisbane as well. So if you get private health cover, often that will cover a portion of therapy if it's needed. So here are a few of those references that I mentioned before. Feel free to pause this to check any of those out if you would like to. And I really hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Feel free, if you'd like, if you've got any questions that you'd like to put on the Facebook page, then go ahead and post them on there. We'll be doing one more of these webinars on this topic. However, tune in next week if you have a child with ASD, or if you know a child with ASD. This time next week, we'll be doing a webinar on the early intervention program, the Imagine Therapies early intervention program. And it's something that I think you guys will really like. So all you have to do to register for that is to email your details to hello@imaginetherapies.com.au, or you can also send an email to iteip@imaginetherapies.com. Thanks very much.